This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. Support for this episode of the Chassidic Story Project comes from Trope Trainer, the gold standard in learning how to chant the Torah online for bar and bat mitzvahs, synagogues, schools, and absolutely anybody who loves the Torah. To get started today, go to kinnor.com. That's KINNOR.com. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. Avigdor was a wealthy Jew who was also a Chassid of the Baal Shem Tov. And he once came to the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, bringing him a large sum of money to be donated to the Jewish community. The Baal Shem Tov, appreciating the donation, he turned to Avigdor and he said to him, "My sweetest friend, I'd like to do you a favor in return. I, the Baal Shem Tov, would like to bless you. What can I bless you with?" And Avigdor, unfortunately, with a great deal of arrogance, he said to the Baal Shem Tov, "Rebbe, I don't need blessings for anything. I have absolutely everything a person could want in life. I have money, I have servants, I have a family, I learn Torah, I have everything that a person could want. I don't need a blessing." The Baal Shem Tov said, "Well, if there's nothing that I can bless you with, then maybe you'll do me a favor. Can I ask something of you?" And Avigdor said, "Yes, of course, Rabbi, anything you want." He said, "Would you please deliver a letter to the head of the charity committee in Brody?" "Of course," said Avigdor. "Just give me the letter, and I'll be happy to take care of this for you." So the Baal Shem Tov took out a pen and paper, and he started writing a letter. He didn't allow Avigdor to see what he was writing, because obviously it wasn't for him. And he sealed it in an envelope and put his special seal on the envelope. He gave it to Avigdor, and Avigdor put it in his jacket pocket and went home. As soon as he got home, he had so many business things to deal with and many things to deal with at the house that by the time he got back home in Brody, he'd completely forgotten about the letter and everything that happened with the Baal Shem Tov. As everyone knows, there's a wheel of fortune. Sometimes you're on the top, and sometimes you're on the bottom. And you should know, my sweetest friends, that when you feel like you're on the top, daven to Hashem that He should never take you down. But if you're really brought down to the bottom, you should know eventually the wheel is going to turn. It's going to pull you back up again. 16 years passed, and unfortunately the wheel of fortune turned for Rebbe Avigdor. He lost all of his money, all of his assets and property. Everything was either sold or destroyed. All of his crops were destroyed. All of his forests were destroyed. He had a total travesty, and he was left penniless. The creditors came, they took his house. They took everything he owned. He was forced even to sell his own clothing just to feed his children. One day, while he's cleaning out the pockets of an old jacket that he was planning on selling, he discovers a letter. It's the same letter that the Baal Shem Tov had given him 16 years before. And just like that, he remembered, "Oh my God, how arrogant was I? I thought I had everything, and I didn't ask for a bracha from the Baal Shem Tov." With tears in his eyes, he said to himself, "Okay, I promised the Heilige Baal Shem Tov that I would deliver this letter, and it's about time that I do it." In the meantime, during those 16 years, the Baal Shem Tov had already passed away. And for sure, whoever the chairman of the committee in Brody wasn't the same person anymore. The letter was addressed to Mr. Tzadok, the chairman of the charity committee of Brody. And so, our friend Avigdor, he runs to the charity committee building, and he finds one of his friends, and he says to him, "Hey, tell me, where can I find Mr. Tzadok?" He said, "Mr. Tzadok, you mean the head of the charity committee?" "Yes, I have to see him immediately." "Well, he's in the shul. I was there just a few minutes ago. Mr. Tzadok is really a lucky man. Just this morning, he was elected to be the chairman of the committee." Avigdor says to himself, "He was elected today? Today, I have this letter from 16 years ago, addressed to the head of the committee, that was elected today?" So Avigdor says to his friend, "Tell me a little bit more about Mr. Tzadok." So the friend says, "Well, Mr. Tzadok was born and raised here in Brody. He was a tailor, and he always had a hard time, never able to make a decent living. He could hardly support his family and lived in such deep poverty. And he would always sit in the back of the synagogue, and of course, no one ever paid any attention to him. Despite all the hours he worked, it was nearly impossible for him to even put together enough money to buy bread for his family. But he didn't forget his former poverty, and recently, The tide changed for Mr. Tzadok. He was introduced to a local nobleman and started making uniforms for all of his servants. And then business really started to pick up because the army made a deal with him to make 5,000 uniforms. He opened a whole factory and he became so rich and had so much respect in the eyes of the community, so everyone elected him to be the head of the charity committee of the town of Brody. But he never forgot his former poverty, and he always gives tzedakah, and he always takes an active role in communal affairs. And that's why this morning he was unanimously elected to the head of the charity committee. So Avigdor, he runs to the shul, and he says, "Where's Mr. Tzadok?" And he sees Mr. Tzadok sitting at a table with lots of notes of requests for financial assistance. And Avigdor runs over to him and he says, "Mr. Tzadok, here's the letter. Here's the letter." And Mr. Tzadok looks at Avigdor and says, "What letter? What are you talking about?" He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was supposed to deliver this letter 16 years ago, but I just remembered it today." So Mr. Tzadok opens the letter and they read it together. "Dear Mr. Tzadok, the man who brought you this letter is named Avigdor. He was once a very wealthy man, but now he's very poor, and he's paid for his haughtiness. Since just this morning you were elected chairman of the charity committee, I request that you do all that you can to assist him, as he has a large family to support. He will once again become successful, and this time he will be more suited to success. In case you doubt my words, I will give you the following sign. Your wife is expecting a baby, and today she will give birth to a boy." They'd hardly concluded reading the letter when someone burst into the synagogue and said, "Mazel tov, Mr. Tzadok! Your wife just had a baby boy." And thanks to the Baal Shem Tov's foresight, Avigdor did become affluent again, except this time he never forgot his poverty, and he remained humble and was admired by all for his wealth and his humility. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com, HASIDIC story.com.